Well, we certainly know who's the key player for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Allen Iverson.
Give you 110%.
Iverson stole the ball, and how do you like that?
Iverson, Allen breaks free.
Iverson, what a move!
Like, I am Philadelphia. When you think of Philadelphia basketball, you think of Allen Iverson.
You are the culture.
I took a ass kicking for me being me in my career, you know, for me looking the way I look and dressing the way I dressed. My whole thing was just being me.
The best basketball player in the world. And when I lose, this is what I gotta go through?
The answer. A scrawny kid from the challenging streets of Virginia became a defining figure in the NBA. Loved by half, criticized by the other. But what can't be argued is his undeniable mark on basketball culture. Off the court, a polarizing phenomenon. On the court, in a league of athletic freaks, he still stood out, not by size, but by his heart. So on June the 7th, 1975 in Hampton, Virginia, Iverson was born into circumstances few would envy. His mother Anne was 15 and unmarried when she gave birth. His biological father, not to be seen. So Iverson, amidst a sewage-bound home, made way on the streets. He played basketball for money, and if he didn't win, he simply wouldn't eat for the night. It was resilience that drove Iverson's character through high school as a multi-talented athlete. 17 years old, he quarterbacked the football team to a state championship. Months later, then winning a basketball state chip. A generational athlete. Yet the glamour and hope of reaching the pros took a steep turn on the 14th of February 1993. Iverson was out with friends on Valentine's Day at a bowling alley, and following an array of racial slurs, a brawl broke out between a group of teenagers. A brawl in which Iverson was said to have hit a woman with a chair. The contradicting persona of Iverson had already begun. Politicians spouted their views. Business people and educators discussed the case, all over a high school junior, but a breathtaking one at best. The town's generational talent facing a prime locked away behind bars. The Iverson case. In the end, he was found guilty, sentenced to 15 years for his role in the fight. An incident in which no white people were charged, and for a teenager with no prior convictions. A verdict that ultimately exposed the deep racial divisions that defined Iverson's hometown. But eventually he was granted clemency and released after 4 months in prison, and an appeals court ultimately overturned the conviction, citing insufficient evidence. Iverson was free. Well, the prison sentence forced him to complete his senior year of high school at a school for at-risk students, so when it came time for college visits, well, no one wanted him. Once recruited by every school in the country for football and basketball.
All that was taken away. No other teams, no other schools were recruiting me anymore.
A singular incident in high school took it all away. It took his mother's word, begging directly to Coach Thompson from Georgetown to get anyone to give him a chance.
I want to thank Coach Thompson for saving my life.
Coach Thompson was one that invested in his players, protecting them and building them, and it was a chance that AI well and truly redeemed. Mr. Excitement, dazzling his way to a 23-point average over 2 years, as two-time All-Big East and two-time Big East DPOY. A storybook turnaround for Iverson, fulfilling the surefire prophecy of an NBA awakening from years ago. Now able to reward his family for their own sacrifices. The confident, sometimes cocky Allen Iverson went first overall to Philadelphia in the 1996 draft. He was the top overall pick in a draft class full of stars, but one in which he became an instant fan favorite thanks to his fearless, flashy style of play.
The crowd is into it. Allen shakes free, gets two!
A league in which everyone wanted Nike, Iverson went with Reebok. A foreshadowing to a career of defying norms and challenging expectations. He went on to win Rookie of the Year, capturing the hearts of Philadelphia, but his growing popularity couldn't shield him from criticism outside of where he called home in Philly.
It might be because of my background, where I come from, what I've been through. I mean, I haven't done anything like some of these guys in the league that they make, up to be such nice guys or great guys.
To some, he personified everything that was wrong with the NBA. The eye-catching cornrows and oversized white t-shirts with shorts that fell below his knees, just like they did on the streets of every city in America. The rugged antithesis of the stars the NBA had deemed worthy of adoration. He was even booed after winning MVP in the Rookie All-Star game, painted out to be some kind of bad guy. But it was just another obstacle for Iverson to overcome in his already difficult life, and amongst it all, Iverson was never going to change. But another polarizing figure was about to enter his life, Larry Brown, the newly appointed head coach of Philadelphia, a traditional coach with an eye for structured basketball centered around passing and defense, so he was thus quick to comment on Iverson's overflow of freedom in his rookie year. But it was constant feedback the hard-nosed Iverson didn't welcome, taking much of the constructive criticism as an attack on his character, as the two struggled to see eye to eye as a result. Irrespective of their differences, the Sixers slowly got better, progressing to 31 wins. But the man they called the answer was still the question in Philadelphia, approaching the second leg of a rookie contract, critics wondering if he could contribute to winning basketball. But it was in year 3 that Brown, having previously coached the Indiana Pacers with Reggie Miller, keyed in on Iverson's scoring talents, keeping him more so off the ball like Reggie, having moved him to the 2 guard. As him and Iverson blossomed to greater heights, AI won his first scoring title with a 26.8 average, leading the Sixers into the playoffs for the first time since 1991. He was rewarded in season with a 6-year, $70 million contract, but it was love he couldn't even garner from his hometown media. How can Allen Iverson, who lost about 150 games in 3 years, committed over 700 turnovers, had a drug and gun-related arrest, and hangs around the worst people possible, earn $70.9 million? Words directly from a Philadelphia newspaper, a mere indication of Iverson's ongoing battle with criticism and ultimately racism. So a lot of the time his play on the court was diminished. In a world where a 6-foot, 165-pound athlete crashed into the paint at will, they had the audacity to find fault with the finished product. But it was on-court play the Magic could now understand in the first round of the playoffs, carrying a young Philly squad onto the second round. But they had met their match in the second round against the Pacers, falling in 4 games. But it was a progressive step for the 76ers, one in which Iverson filled into his role as a leader for the team. Now leading into the 2000s, Iverson's on-court play never wavered, up to 28 points a game. But off-court drama with Coach Brown overshadowed what should have been an incredible year for Philly. It spilled over in a game against Detroit. Down 23 points at half, Brown pulled his starters early in the third, which left Iverson feeling disrespected. He felt he did everything for this team and got dealt like trash. That reaction, a final straw for a fed-up Larry Brown, who demanded Iverson to be traded.
In Philadelphia, coach Larry Brown and guard Allen Iverson have been going at it again. Iverson was miffed that he was benched Saturday night. He suggested he might want to trade.
In a Kobe and Shaq-like sit-down the following day, organized by President Pat Crochet, the two seemed to have cleared their agendas after constant back-and-forth argument. "We cool now," the words of Iverson. The two coming to reconcile on their one similarity, winning, no matter how different the two approached the game. But just 2 months later, trouble resurfaced. The team had just had chats relating to sacrifice and dedication to each other. And days later, the ignorant Iverson stayed out late partying in Miami, calling in sick to the team's shoot-around the next day. Management had enough, suspending the superstar, which only fueled his frustration. It wasn't just a punishment for missing a shoot-around in Miami, but a culmination of a disrespectful body of work from Iverson, who missed more practices than one could remember.
Allen Iverson can take over a game as very few guards can. Allen Iverson also has cursed out his coach after being taken out of games. He creates with incredible speed. He slows his team's progress by missing practice.
So regular disgruntled continued through to the postseason. The season summed up in Game 1 of the playoffs. AI exploded for 40 points on 25 shots, but more explosive were his post-game comments, responding to his own GM who questioned his connection to the team. He argued that he was being treated like the 12th man on the roster, and all routes pointed to an Iverson exit out of Philadelphia. In the end, they fell to the Pacers in the second round for the second year running. Brown denoted a lack of ball movement and players not following instructions as the reasons for their downfall. It's not like they didn't have a chance though in the second round. They went to Philly down 3-2, but Iverson had a poor game with 18 points on 35% shooting in the must-win scenario. So down the stretch in the final Game 6, Iverson came to the bench, draped a towel over his head, and broke down crying. What can never be questioned is his heart, averaging 45 minutes for the playoffs, leading the team in scoring for all but one game. But the melodrama of the season had all crashed down on him in a second round exit. It was clear this formula of back and forth petty argument wasn't going to work with Coach Brown, so AI cried on the bench, seemingly unsure if it was his last time in a Philadelphia uniform. It was now grow up or get out for AI. Despite the rumours of trades elsewhere, it was always thought that it was Iverson's team, not Brown's. However, when the team re-signed Brown in the middle of the season, the power shifted in the organisation. Philly were committed to Brown, whether AI liked it or not. So amidst trade rumours in the offseason, AI came out publicly to say he'd struggle to play another year under Brown, believing it had gotten out of hand. So the front office and Brown orchestrated a blockbuster 4-team trade to send Iverson to Detroit. Just like that, the Philadelphian cultural icon was about to leave. But after receiving the news, Iverson begged for his stay, advocating to change his off-court antics and become the leader he was supposed to be. Whilst Crochet thought it was too late, Iverson got a lifeline from Matt Geiger, whose contract kicker would have to be waived to fulfill the trade. Unwilling to sacrifice his pay, the deal was thus voided. Iverson got a final lifeline in Philadelphia, a lifeline he made the most of, like he'd done with Coach Thompson at Georgetown. It was a year that had to become a turning point for him and Brown, and it was.
I thought that he was criticizing me, and I couldn't accept constructive criticism. And then when I started to realize that he just loved me and wanted what's best for me and the team, then that's when I turned from Allen Iverson, a good basketball player, to a Hall of Fame.
It was never going to be completely smooth, but it was slowly getting better. Winning covered any cracks that would show up on the surface, starting 10-0 in the season. And in a touching moment post the 2001 All-Star Game, there was someone who Iverson wanted to share the moment with.
It's definitely special. Where's my coach? Coach Brown. Is he around? This is a tribute to Coach Brown.
It became clear that Iverson had not only matured, but embraced his role as the leader Philadelphia always hoped he'd be. It was newfound love that propelled the two to contention, sitting atop of the NBA. The little man reached new heights. He'd won a scoring title already, but this season eclipsed all. His combination of balance, agility, and toughness around the rim culminated as the greatest small man scorer of all time, shooting a ridiculous 65% at the rim.
At 160 pounds and the size that he is, the physical beating that he takes every night is a physical marvel.
For many fans, they finally saw themselves in the brash baller, 165 pounds straight. And if he can do it, so can I. It was Philadelphia in paradise, as Iverson became the shortest and lightest player to ever be named MVP. Coach Brown also winning Coach of the Year. But having worked all year for home court in the playoffs, they blew it away in Game 1.
This place is absolutely stunned. And the Sixers continue to be haunted by the Pacers in the postseason.
The next day, first to practice, Iverson was going over the tape with Coach Brown. They were mistakes in Game 1 that weren't to be repeated. Iverson going for 45 points and 9 assists in Game 2. They were the better team and they knew it. So it was play that rejuvenated a 76ers team, winning the next two to advance and finally eclipse their Achilles heel Pacers.
They knocked you out of the playoffs the last 2 years.
That's why it's satisfying, because, we kind of had a monkey off on our back, and it felt good to kind of get it off,
Next up, the answer versus Vinsanity, a matchup of two rising stars that the NBA had been craving since the days of Magic and Bird. But again, the Sixers made things hard on themselves, dropping Game 1 at home. So much like last series, the pressure was on in Game 2. And as the game etched on, that pressure only seemed to build. But Iverson, in a display of greatness, wheeled his team over the line. A man who wasn't going to let his team lose, launching high-arcing shots from everywhere on the court.
Iverson with 47 points, and Allen Iverson off the glass slam. 43 in the fourth quarter. Iverson holds up, and he's set club record with 52 points. This is one for the books, and has scored the last 19 points for the Philadelphia 76ers.
And when asked about the pressure of the game, Iverson quickly dismissed it. After all the shit I've seen in my life, you think I'm gonna feel pressure from a motherfucking basketball game? But unlike the Pacers, this series wasn't done yet. Vince responded for a 50-piece in Game 3, and after a 16-point comeback from the Raptors in Game 4, Iverson calmly sunk a dagger with 2 minutes left.
Iverson answers back with a three. Allen Iverson puts Philly back up 81-78.
To end the Raptor train and even up the series. And ahead of Game 5 in Philly, Iverson was named MVP. Unsurprisingly, what followed was proof of the most valuable. Dog walking the Raptors for another 50-piece on only 2 free throws and 32 total shots. This was Iverson at his best. In the span of just over a week, Iverson had etched his name in NBA royalty amongst the league's best playoff scoring games, from a 6-foot, 160-pound, 25-year-old. But it was excitement short-lived for Iverson, as the Raptors flipped the script to roll a Game 7 on the cards.
The two most exciting words in all of sports. Game 7.
A Game 7 that Philly needed an Iverson explosion, a chance to stamp his validation on the MVP trophy. Not that he could care. Yet Iverson reined in the offensive impulses to set up his teammates out of the double teams. He garnered a career-high 16 assists, where on a night that he couldn't get it going scoring-wise, he set up his teammates who got them over the line in the fourth quarter. One step closer to an elusive championship ring. It was the emergence of Allen Iverson as the complete superstar package leading a Philadelphia team into battle. Next up, Ray Allen and the Bucks in the conference finals. But finally, Philly would take the opener at home. But hobbled by a tailbone injury, Iverson went 5 for 26 for 16 points in a Game 2 loss. An indication for Iverson to sit out in Game 3 and regain some health. On the sidelines, he watched his team fight for a 6-point loss. But he knew he couldn't watch from the sidelines no more. Blood, guts, and glory. A bleeding Allen Iverson led Philly to a Game 4 win. In the fourth quarter, blood gushed from his mouth after being elbowed by Ray Allen, but knowing if he stopped to get treatment, the refs would take him out of the game. So the tough Iverson swallowed the blood, proceeding to score 11 of the final 13 Philly points. The type of character the league should advocate for, not diminish. But as Philly had done all year, they made things hard on themselves, crucially dropping Game 6 despite 26 fourth quarter points from Iverson in a furious rally. So again, it was win or go home in Philadelphia. Before the game, the Bucks coach asserted that great little players don't dominate playoff basketball. But this little player had other plans in Game 7. With everything on the line, Iverson stormed into Game 7 like a man possessed. In the face of it all, he dropped 44 points for a Game 7 win. He didn't just win, he carried Philly to the finals, delivering the moment that endlessly criticized Iverson had always deserved. But an even greater opponent awaited in the NBA Finals, the colossal LA Lakers. Individually, it was Kobe v. Iverson, the brash, tattooed kid from inner city Virginia versus the young, confident, so-called industry plant from suburban Philadelphia. Broadly speaking as well, the Lakers were a team polar opposite to Philadelphia, having flawlessly run through the playoffs, not losing a game since April Fools. No one gave this Philly team a chance. A Lakers sweep was inevitable, and they immediately showed why, bolstering to an 18-5 run early in Game 1. But as the game progressed, so did Iverson, catching fire. He slashed over and over, careening to the goal, a foot shorter and half the weight of the immovable Shaq. He had 30 by half, and after a quiet second half from himself and both teams respectively, the game fell to overtime. A chance for Philadelphia to steal one amidst all the doubt. So down 1 with a minute 30 left, Philadelphia needed a bucket.
The 76ers with the ball down by 1. Iverson for 3. Yes! Iverson.
How about that?
And steps over Tyronn Lue.
7 straight points by Iverson. Looked like he was dead in the water.
He hesitates, jab stepping to assess his prey before crossing over Lou, watching the ball stifle through the net in glory, with an exaggerated high step over his fallen foil. A moment that struck beyond sports into Philadelphia's insurgent soil, a series of plays that propelled them to Game 1 success.
You got so many basketball experts, but the only guys that know is the guys on the floor. We got heart. We're gonna play with that first, play with the talent second.
48 points on the road as the underdog, but Iverson reassured his team that they hadn't done anything yet.
We ain't do nothing yet, we got a long way to go.
So unfortunately for the 76ers, the better team clicked into gear. A Game 2 loss quickly surmounted into another one in Game 3. Each loss that went by, a dagger etched further into the heart of Philadelphia that this one had slipped away. It was play the slew of Iverson haters flocked to, waiting for the team to misfire in the postseason. A revealing article published after another Game 4 loss criticized Iverson for not putting his kids to bed, parading him for butchering his English and wanting to vomit at any thought of Iverson being a role model. This wasn't unfamiliar for Iverson. A billion loved him, but more than a billion hated him. So as Game 5 ended and Philadelphia were eliminated, at last the magical run came to a close. Iverson battled all series long for 35 points on 41% shooting and was appropriately serenaded off the court by a loving Philadelphia crowd.
It's been a spectacular season for the most valuable player, Allen Iverson.
For a playoff run they might never see again. So Iverson, despite all of the critiques on and off the floor, after a heaven-sent playoff run, by the summer of 2001, he felt untouchable. But unfortunately, his plethora of injuries through the postseason required attention in the summer. He held off, believing they'd heal on its own, but reluctantly, when things didn't magically heal, he was forced to get surgery just before training camp, alongside Sixth Man of the Year Aaron McKee and Eric Snow, who was out for 3 months, all of whom were valuable contributors in last year's run. As a result, the team started 0-5 with AI out, a downsloped year that only continued as it went on. The team suddenly seemed much older. Mutombo in particular seemed to have aged considerably. So as the team stumbled, AI fell back into bad habits. Brown called him out to the media, pointing out that Iverson's absence from practice was typical, and that he often showed up reeking of alcohol. Iverson's response to this? Well, he missed the next day's shoot-around. It was back and forth disputes that simply got boring. The drama of a teenage relationship. Two people who clearly wanted each other's love and respect, yet kept sabotaging themselves with stubbornness. So the team hovered around 500 for much of the season. Iverson's scoring output continued, but efficiency dropped, shooting below 40% from the field and below 30% from three. But admittedly, still couldn't straighten his arm out from ongoing elbow pain. Either way, they came into the playoffs as the 6th seed against rival Boston Celtics. Iverson shot merely 15 of 45 in the first 2 games amidst 2 losses, feeding into shot-chucking narratives, and among trade rumors, it felt like going back to Philadelphia for Game 3, it was win or find a new home. So perhaps predictably, Iverson then dominated with 42 points in a Game 3 win, and in Game 4, having struggled leading up to the 4th quarter, with 80 seconds left, the answer took over.
Piece of it and kept it alive. Iverson to the glass and gets the...
In the final 77 seconds, there were stars and there was Allen Iverson, but the win or go home Game 5 summed up the season for Philadelphia. Paul Pierce tore the team apart for 46 points in a blowout loss. Iverson had a modest 31 points, but it came with no merit. This team had Allen Iverson, the rest so different from last year. An embarrassing conclusion for the reigning Eastern Conference champs, but for Brown and AI, the drama was only beginning. In end-of-season interviews with Coach Brown, AI was a no-show, so Brown went to the media highlighting Iverson's continued problems. So when AI got on the mic for his post-season interview, he quickly filled with fury.
We sitting here, I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice. Not the game that I go out there and die for and play every game like it's my last. Not the game. We're talking about practice, man.
It was Iverson's way of saying, I'm not the problem with this team. But what's often forgotten in the comedy of it all are his words later on.
Just for 1 minute, stick your foot in my shoes and try to deal with what I go through in my life. My best friend, dead. Dead. And we lost. And this is what I gotta go through for the rest of the summer.
It was in fact an interview of a worn-out star.
I'm hurt too. I'm hurt too.
Before the season's start, Iverson's best friend had passed, so it was a season of grief, not determination for him. It doesn't excuse his careless behaviour for a large part of 7 months, but it's reason for some of Iverson's outbursts. Iverson should never have been put on the mic that day. Just like that, he'd gone from trade rumours 1 year, league MVP and NBA Finals the next, to another year of trade rumours. Either way, Allen Iverson entered year 7, a year that was plunging and plunging quick leading up to the All-Star break. The team again hovered at 500 and AI was playing the worst ball of his career, 27 points on 40% shooting. But fueled by possibilities of an ongoing Olympic selection, he let his game be his most eloquent argument, climbing to 28 points and 7 assists on better efficiency to lead Philly to the best record post All-Star break. So in Game 1 of the playoffs against 5th-seeded Hornets, Allen Iverson proved his best ball was still ahead of him, with an egregious 55 points. He followed it up with a stunning series and closeout 45-point game to advance them to the second round. He was doing it all himself, but a solo act that proved difficult against a hard-nosed 1-seeded Pistons team. He didn't have the same defensively oriented players to complement his shot-hungry game style like in 0-1. So they lost games 1 and 2 in Detroit. They consolidated at home, but a crucial Game 5 went begging as AI shot a mere 5 for 25 from the field in a loss. So it came to a win-or-go-home Game 6, and AI rocked up 30 minutes before tip-off.
But he told them he had a flat tire on the way to the game, and their feeling right now, talking to Billy King, the general manager, is if there's one thing Allen Iverson's not late for, it's a game.
A mere indication of his connection to the current roster. So it was a late arrival, but again an early exit for AI and the Sixers. Knocked out in the second round, but this time there was no drama.
I think the last straw, we were down to Detroit, and I left the house a little too late.
As Brown foregoed the teenage back and forth with Iverson for another head coaching job, stepping down after 5 years in charge. A heartbreaking conclusion for two that only focused on one thing, winning, but remained so stagnant in their ideologies, refusing to budge until there was nothing left of the relationship but sadness and regret.
He gives everything he can to possibly win. He might sometimes be misguided, but he competes every single night, and I love him for that. I wish that he realized when kids watch that, they're not seeing the real side of him.
Nah, I got a lot of respect for him. I love him. I mean, he taught me a lot. Like, just because somebody disciplining you, you know, that don't mean they don't love you.
So as the 03-04 season came along, Larry Brown had proven to be the piece holding a bitter Sixers franchise together. It was a season of nagging injuries for Iverson, missing 34 games on the year, intertwined with interchanging head coaches. Iverson's heart on the court was always there, but his refusal to come off the bench after missing 3 games with a back injury alluded to a still selfish Iverson with no commitment to interim coach at the time, Chris Ford. He also missed practice for family reasons, but showed up to a nightclub the same day. Overall, an ultimately disastrous season that saw the Sixers miss the playoffs entirely. But at last, Philly came to their senses to get Iverson a second star in 04-05. They had little choice, facing a negative record come mid-February, wasting another year of AI's prime, who sensationally returned back to form, averaging 30 points and 8 assists, having moved back to point guard. So the Sixers acquired former All-Star Chris Webber from the Kings as they won 17 of their next 27 games as Iverson clinched a 4th scoring title. Off the back of his performances, they snuck into the playoffs as a 7th seed against former coach Larry Brown. Poetic that Brown had left Iverson behind and found success with a team that played the way he always wanted. So unsurprisingly, it was a similar story for the Sixers.
Well, we certainly know who's the key player for the Philadelphia 76ers. Many feel Allen Iverson had the best year of his career this season.
Iverson, well, he was Iverson. He played damn near every minute of the series, averaging 31 and 10 on career best efficiency. But the reason the Pistons had success was they stopped the others, as Iverson could only strangle one win in a 4-game series loss to Detroit in the first round. But with the start of the 05 season came a series of controversial decisions for different reasons. Having just propelled the Sixers to the playoffs in a stunning move, Jim O'Brien was fired. Morris Cheeks hired as replacement. It was Iverson's 4th coach in 3 years. But more broadly, David Stern decided to impose large-scale changes to the mandatory dress code of his players. It was done with hopes of removing any semblance of the new and gangster NBA. So Iverson, of course, didn't accept this and saw the regulations as a personal attack on him, one that aimed to dim the light that followed their brightest star, who introduced the true culture of inner-city America to the world of basketball. Either way, Iverson had already stamped his mark on the sport. NBA players had begun to dress as he did, adopting his brash attitude he so charmingly carried into the league. But on the court for Philadelphia, it was a season of dismal expectation as a fringe playoff team. There was much relying on Chris Webber's health and level of play as a broken down 32-year-old. So expectedly, the team hovered at 500 for majority of the year until a disastrous final 20 games, in which they lost 14 of them, with Iverson out for a number of games. It was a sad season that ended on a sad note, as Webber and Iverson sat out the last game of the season on Fan Appreciation Night of all nights, rocking up only minutes before tip-off, especially as fans speculated that it could be AI's last home game ever. So his absence was a slap in the face to the community that adored him. So amidst another season of repeated trade rumours, it was clear this experiment with the younger Iguodala, older Chris Webber, and primed Allen Iverson wasn't working. So when they started the 06-07 season 5-10, it was only further reaffirmation the front office needed.
I was on a franchise where winning was not the priority. That happened to him. Like, he had some great years with Larry Brown, but once Larry Brown left, it wasn't about winning, and he getting blamed, and I think it wore him down a little bit.
So as Iverson was sent home before Friday night's game in early December, it appeared it was AI's final answer. He hinted at a trade following suit, and it was confirmed a day later. The 76er chairman Ed Snyder bluntly confirmed to the press, "We'll trade him." Allen Iverson's time in Philadelphia was a turbulent, traumatic saga. He was the city's heart and soul on the court, but off it was just a story, creating a friction that neither side could fully resolve. So on December the 19th, 2006, the answer was traded to the Denver Nuggets, marking the end of an unforgettable era in Philadelphia. But what followed was a partnership with the all-star Carmelo Anthony, and in year one, Iverson brought little of the drama from Philadelphia with him, respecting Coach Carl, who allowed him to be himself. But what hadn't changed was his playstyle. Melo specialized in isolation post-ups, where Iverson was thus idle, the style of play that Iverson himself prospered in Philadelphia. Either way, it was too much talent on the floor to not win games of basketball. They ended up as the 6th seed in the West. AI was definitely a fraction stiffer, but still quick relative to the league. So after a Game 1 win against San Antonio, the duo combined for 60 points. It was everything the front office had in mind when they paired the two together. Yet, this was the peak. Whilst Melo held his level of play, AI had 4 consecutive disasters, averaging 20 points on 34% shooting over the last 4 games. The worst series of his career, he claimed, as Denver fell in the first round. At least on paper, the following year looked to be promising. Melo was only getting better. Camby came off a Defensive Player of the Year, and Iverson had enough juice left for a last dance. But unfortunately, their place in the Western Conference was murky, and as Iverson's late-night exploits and blow-ups with his wife grew more common, the team could only prosper an 8th seed, albeit with 50 wins in the all-time tough Western Conference. So against Kobe Bryant and the Lakers, well, they stood little chance, blown out in the first 3 games and eventually rinsed off in a Game 4. A miserable Game 3 where the duo went 20 of 38 was mere indication that 2 scoring number ones couldn't lead a team effectively. As a result, in the 08-09 season, the Nuggets thought the more pass-first Chauncey Billups would be a better fit alongside Melo. Iverson's presence thought to have lost its luster as he was dealt to Detroit. Little did we know that Denver would be AI's last time on the biggest stage. What followed was a sudden fall-off. His body now felt the pressure of more than a decade of averaging at least 40 minutes a game, so his scoring output dropped to 17 points a night. And out with a nagging back injury, Pistons coach Michael Curry declared Iverson would come off the bench in his return. Unsurprisingly though, Iverson voiced his concerns from the bench in his return, and only a couple games in was ruled out for the year with ongoing back pain. Contract expired, Iverson had little suitors in the offseason, before he was eventually picked up by the Grizzlies, a stretch with a team that lasted all but 3 games before both parties agreed to part ways. It seemed like the end for Iverson, but in a poetic turn, Philadelphia, the city that once made him a legend, offered him one last chance. A city always welcoming for those who keep trying.
You know, the last couple of years has just been hell because, you know, all I want to do is play basketball.
He kissed the logo in his return in what felt like a farewell tour for AI. His 14 points were valuable, sure, but this was bigger, an opportunity to leave this game on a bright note. Unfortunately, his time was cut short, having to spend time with his daughter, suffering from a Kawasaki disease, and it was later announced he would not return to the 76ers for the rest of the season. He'd have a brief run in Turkey that was again cut short with injury, before officially retiring in 2013.
I'm formally announcing my retirement from basketball.
Unfortunately, it'd been years of hell for AI, plagued by media attacks from his own supporters in Stephen A. Smith, who exposed his drinking and gambling problems a week after he had been released by the Sixers, adding further insult to an image the NBA tried their best to tarnish. It was a heartbreaking end for a player who would give everything on the court, only to be shunned off it. So it's easy to look back at the negatives and point to the missed shots, the turnovers, the off-court chaos. But what Allen Iverson did was far greater. He captured the hearts of millions. He won over the people, won the undying love of Philadelphia, and won a generation of future athletes who aspired to be like AI. When others conformed, Iverson stayed true to himself.
This guy who, that has the effect on all of these people in the world like this, we want him to be this way. Well, I didn't want to be that. You know what I mean?
What did you want to be?
Me.
And who is you?
A human, man. Somebody that bleeds, somebody that cry, somebody that make mistakes. I'm real, just like everybody else, man. I'm human, man. I'm not perfect.